Okay, we're just going to take a short adjournment while we contact the chair, so if people just bear with us a few moments. Thank you. Governance and Audit Committee. Before we start, please can I remind everyone that this meeting is being live streamed and that the recording archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, please use the raise hand function to alert the chair that you would like to speak. The chair will indicate when it is your turn to speak, so please then select the request to speak button, which will allow you to come on screen. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function. The chat function should only be used to highlight any technical issues and or to get the attention of the Chair or myself as Democratic Services Officer. Thank you. Over to you, Nigel.
Thank you. So welcome everyone to the meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. So can I just check if there were any apologies, please?
Yes, obviously the Chair's Gareth Chapman's having difficulties, and we also got apologies from Matthew Evans. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so on to the second item, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of February. So if I can take those for accuracy first of all, did anyone have any queries or points of accuracy regarding the minutes? I'll take that as a no, so we'll take those as approved. And let me just check. Yep, thank you. So, yeah, we'll take those as approved then. Can I just have a raise of hands for approving those, please?
Yeah, we've got Councillor Hooper and Councillor Goodjohn. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Brilliant, thank you. So on to item 4 then, which is the Audit Wales recommendations regarding governance and the planning service. So this is... Sorry,
Vice Chair. So, we've just need to take declarations before we go into that. So.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, getting ahead of myself. Yeah, any declarations of interest then, please?
Nothing in the chamber, Chair, so we can move on.
Okay, thank you. So now on to item 4, which is the Audit Wales recommendations regarding governance and the planning service. And so, yeah, who's presenting this, please? So, Ian?
Yeah, so Ian, if we're going to ask Ian Robinson to come on screen, Chair, thank you.
Yeah. Ian Robinson, do you want to come on and present that one, please?
Thank you, Chair. Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
This report relates to Audit Wales' review of the governance arrangements of the Vale of Glamorgan's planning service carried out in 2023. Audit Wales were going to attend the meeting this evening to present briefly, followed by me briefly going through how the council or how officers propose to respond to the recommendations. Unfortunately, they've not been able to attend for some technical reasons. So I will run through the recommendations that came through from Audit Wales and then the proposed response to those. Audit Wales did send through a briefing note for me, which it sets out the main points that were in the planning committee report originally and subsequently in the references on from that to ENR and this evening. It sets out what the purpose of the review was. So I'll just go through the main points. The purpose of the review was to look at the governance arrangements relating to the planning service and to consider, do they demonstrate proper arrangements to secure value for money in the use of its resources? Audit Wales found that the planning service has actions clearly aligned to the corporate wellbeing objectives and a supportive working culture, but there were some gaps in governance arrangements which they felt made some procedures not as clear as they could be. So subsequently, they identified the following key findings. The following key recommendations. The first related to governance arrangements and areas that could be strengthened. And secondly, there was a recommendation relating to the service plan and reference within that to presenting performance measures and targets. Now, the report on this evening's papers goes through those recommendations, but I will just touch upon what Audit Wales and myself feel are the kind of the key points. Bear with me one moment. So the key recommendations were, in terms of governance arrangements, that the council should agree an up-to-date terms of reference for the council's planning committee that clearly states its purpose, role and responsibilities, and then regularly review the terms of reference. To develop an up-to-date plain language planning protocol and include it in the constitution and on the council's planning webpage, so that it's easily accessible to members of the public and all stakeholders engaging in our planning service. Undertake a planned review of the scheme of delegation to ensure that the planning committee is focused on the most strategically important planning applications, and ensure, this was a minor specific point relating to the scheme of delegation, ensure that planning applications submitted by or on behalf of all officers in the planning and related services are considered by planning committee and not dealt with under delegated powers. And as I mentioned, the second recommendation related to the service plan. So these recommendations were presented to planning committee in January, along with the organisational response form that has been returned to Audit Wales, which sets out how the council would propose to deal with these recommendations. And in that, we identified that initially this would be reported to planning committee for comment. And then it would be referred on to E&R, as I mentioned earlier, and then subsequently a reference to this evening. Now, the organisational response form suggests that following that, and consideration being given to all the points raised by members in those respective committees, that the documents as recommended, the terms of reference, the planning protocol, and any changes to the scheme of delegation would be drafted and presented under a separate report for endorsement by Cabinet, and then if that happens, subsequently then referred on to full council to be agreed. At the previous meeting at E&R, one of the recommendations was that this be considered slightly more widely with a particular reference to equalities. So I'm currently in conversation with the council's engagement officer about what would represent kind of appropriate further consultation opportunities. For example, the Equalities Consultative Forum. So we haven't determined yet exactly what form that may take, but that's something currently being reviewed. And I've discussed that briefly with Audit Wales, and whilst we had set out a timeline in the response form which aimed at going to Cabinet and Council after this evening's meeting, they are comfortable with the principle of engaging further, recognising that will probably delay the adoption of those documents, but seeing it as a positive step to consult more widely to make sure that when we do in particular develop the plain language protocol, which will cover many aspects of the planning process and how it's delivered and how it's engaged within the Vale, that we have kind of as wider evidence base, I guess, as we can, to make sure that it focuses on things of importance to the people that engage with the process. So just briefly, a summary of the key points raised at those various stages. At planning committee, members expressed concern just to ensure that changes to the scheme of delegation wouldn't be looking to unduly limit the scope of applications considered by members at planning committee. I think there was some concern that some members expressed that actually they felt more should be coming to planning committee. And when I explained the Audit Wales kind of report on that point, I emphasised that Audit Wales have tried to convey through their report that planning committees should be focusing on the strategically most important matters. That's their role, their function, and that's also a large part of delivering value for money in terms of the service, bearing in mind the cost and time taken in putting together planning committees, so making sure they're efficient in terms of their function and the types of applications. Then when it was subsequently referred on to E&R, as I referred to, there was the recommendation regarding further engagement, and again just some points emphasising the importance of making sure it is truly a plain language protocol that will be easily readable for everyone that engages in the process. They were the key points. Those are set out in the report tonight. So here we are at Governance and Audit, just for further review from this committee and members, and for me to take note of any further comments, any recommendations, any key areas that members wish to see addressed in those documents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian, for that summary. It was a really good summary there. Thank you for that. Can I open it up to members for questions? Are there any questions on this paper? Councillor Prothero.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ian. I really would just like to say that I endorse and support all recommendations that have come from both committees. I'm not on the planning committee myself, so the fact that there aren't already a terms of reference was a bit of a surprise to me. So I absolutely think that's a really, really good idea. Plain language protocol, again, that is a really, really helpful thing. As a member of the public and as a councillor, sometimes trying to find out what's happening on our website, it is quite complicated and a bit confusing. And I think having a plain language protocol that's going to be accessible to members of the public will be really, really helpful. I think also that it would be a helpful thing also for us to see with the measurements of the planning that's going into our service plan, that we can have some data on what is going through and possibly what's going through on delegated powers and what's being referred to committee. I appreciate the importance of having strategically and contentious planning decisions going to committee, but it would be good to know, just an idea of the percentage of this work that's going that way. But I absolutely support all of these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prothero. Ian, did you want to come back on that at all in terms of the data point?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, just briefly on a couple of points. Thanks, Councillor Prothero, for what you said about the protocol. I've said this at previous committees, but just for the record here tonight, again, I think from my mind as well, as well as providing extra clarity to stakeholders about process and how to do things, it's important for me, in the interest of kind of transparency and consistency, that that members of the public, applicants, objectors, recognise that there's a kind of a clear and fair process and that everyone's treated equally. If a member of the public has a concern with any aspect, who do they go to? Whether it's the team leader, then the operational manager, etc. But there's a clear kind of a clear structure and a clear process. So there's no perception that certain people have got access to different resources within the council for advice on planning matters. So I think that consistency is really important. And similarly, would echo Councillor Prothero's comments about planning committee. And I think what we'll do is be regularly reporting to planning committee on those points. And I think, yes, things like statistics about the application types come to committee, majors, minors, what percentage of applications come to committee are called in, as opposed to things that fell outside of the scheme of delegation in the first place. Maybe some statistics about how those matters are determined, percentages with recommendation or against recommendation. And then alongside that, other statistics, numbers of applications determined, again, ratios of approvals, appeal statistics, everything which can kind of put the meat on the bones for members of planning committee and subsequently anybody looking at planning committee to see how the service is performing, how we're making our decisions, what those decisions represent. How they relate to the development plan, LDB allocations, how we're performing on LDB policies and things like that. So yeah, in summary, I'd echo that, but just trying to give a little flavour of what that reporting would look like.
Thank you, Ian. That's great. I'd echo the points there about the terms of reference. In particular, I was quite surprised to read that as well. And just one question for management. Sorry, Councillor Goodjohn, I think you want to come in. I'll come to you next. Question from me generally is the planning committee seems like quite a significant committee to not have a terms of reference. Are we aware of any other committees in that vein? And just thinking widely about whether there are any others that should have terms of references that currently don't. I don't know whether that's answerable in this or whether that's something you could come back to a future meeting on. I don't even know who that question would be to. I don't know whether there's anyone in the or Ian, did you want to come back in on that?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to answer in respect of other committees. I mean, my understanding from Democratic colleagues is that there is a terms of reference, but this would be represent an updating and kind of modernisation of that to ensure that it's fit for purpose and accurately represents the planning committee as it sits now and its functions. So my understanding, Gareth can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there is one, but Audit Wales are advocating for this being updated to ensure that it's reflective of our modern day planning committee.
Yeah, just to clarify, Ian's correct. There is a terms of reference, and all committees will have a terms of reference. It's just sometimes they do get outdated, I suppose. And I think the planning one has not been updated for probably a good few years, and I think it's something that Audit Wales picked up. But just to clarify, all committees will have a terms of reference in the Constitution. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. Gareth Chapman.
Nigel, can I just say firstly, thank you for chairing. Thank you for chairing, but I've been buffeting like mad here, so it's a bit like Norman Collier, for those of us can remember it, and, wheel tappers and shunters, so my apologies.
No problem.
I've got some issues. Whilst I understand the recommendations set out in the response to Audit Wales's issues, I've just got a couple of issues in regards to when will we see the various documents before they go to council, because obviously it's for us to get the assurance in regards to
Sorry, Gareth.
I've got some really key areas here, and I think. Can you still hear me?
We did lose you there for a moment, Gareth. So I think we picked up the point around having assurance that when the documents come to governance and audit, and you would just elaborate a bit further on then.
Yeah, I think they need to come to us before they go to council, because in the report, there's some instances in the reports, because in the one, well, they're not paginated, the issue in regards to call-in, the head of sustainable development said that Audit Wales did not suggest that the council should specifically limit or change the call-in procedure. And I don't know where it says that in the audit report. And there are some key statements in it. Because obviously there's a major issue about the protocol. So unless the protocol is drafted robustly to cover all the points in the Wales audit report, then well, we need to be assured that that's done. And again, there's another comment in the one report, paragraph 2.12, in regards again to the protocol. And I think the key area as well is some mentioning where councillors have made comments. You've got the one which went to the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, where Councillor S. Lloyd Selby asked for clarification to the scheme and whether members would still be able to call in a planning application. Yeah, my concern is again there, it's, in some respects going back to the days when, if someone objected, the matter would come to planning committee. So I think there's where the protocol needs to be robust in regards to local members calling in, because otherwise planning committee will be determining all the local matters where a local member objects. And more importantly, there's a comment from Councillor Ernest. I said, in regards to the concerns in relation to the increased numbers of planning applications made under officer delegation. And that's where, most decisions should actually be made. They shouldn't be going to planning committee. And most authorities in Wales have adopted that for many years, that, it's big applications go to the planning committee. So I think whilst I'm happy to accept the responses to the Audit Wales recommendations, before any of the protocol, the other document, terms of reference, and that goes anywhere, I believe we as governance and audit ought to see them before they go there, to ensure that they provide the assurance for this committee that the authority is dealing with their planning matters robustly and proportionately and balanced. That's my view on that matter, Nigel.
Thank you, Gareth, for those points. Yeah, some very valid points there. And I think we're asking for a new action or recommendation there to be set that comes back then to the Governance and Audit Committee prior to going to full council. So yeah, that's fine. Are there any other questions at this point?
Yeah, Councillor Hooper has asked if you could speak.
Yeah, Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. 3 points, and they're all 2 of them are generally positive. The first thing, I think, just reflecting on the findings from this report, is that they were very talking about the way that the governance happened in the planning department was all very positive until the terms of reference and the points we've just been talking about. The second point I just want to make is that I'm pleased to see the way that, and I mentioned this in environment and regeneration, the way the department, and Ian in particular, has worked with Audit in this, and that should be commended. We spend time in this committee often challenging managers and saying, how well have you worked with Audit? And I think this is an example where they've worked positively and should be noted. My last point is less positive, and this relates to Audit Wales. I think this report, given it's come to this committee, also went to the Environment and Regeneration, and Audit Wales weren't available for that meeting. They're not available for this meeting. I think that whilst Ian has done a good job in showing the report to us, I think they should be here. Technical issues, cars, I've seen no traffic jams on my way here this evening. They could have made it. They could have made the last meeting. So I just want that point noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper, for those points. Yeah, noted and agreed in relation to those. Councillor Goodjohn, did you want to come in at all? I noticed that you'd appeared a couple of times. I didn't know whether that was... Did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. I mostly wanted to make many of the same points that Chapman has made. I think that the report, the actual policies that are coming out of this recommendation need to come here first before they go to full council. And the timeline that's set out in the recommendation itself, the completion dates, they don't seem to be right, quite frankly, because it seems to be that these completion dates are for the policies themselves, where they look closer to the Audit Wales response. So I'm not 100% sure as to why they're there if the policy itself hasn't even gone to planning committee yet, and it's meant to be done in December 2023. So that doesn't seem right to me. Additionally, I think this is a vital matter because of the discussion that we had at full council on the 6th of March, because this is an extremely sensitive issue for a lot of people. The governance has to be done absolutely correctly. It would shock members of the committee how many conversations I've had with residents that assume that if anything goes wrong with the planning committee and any kind of mistake is made, that immediately it's done maliciously. The governance has to be absolutely straightforward. It has to be easy for people to understand, and it has to be followed to the letter, or otherwise it does sow distrust in the public. This is a vital matter. So yes, mostly just to reiterate and second the points made by Gareth, because it's absolutely vital that they come here first before full council, so we can properly thrash it out instead of having a last minute dash to get amendments in, as we saw at full council just last week. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Ian, I see you've put your hand up there. Yeah, if I can just ask you to come back in, particularly on the points around the completion dates, if you could clarify what those completion dates are for, that would be great, please.
Of course, yes. So when the organisational response form was sent back, Audit Wales wanted an idea of the timeline within which the council would propose to respond. Now, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because planning committee in December was cancelled or delayed back to January because of a lack of an agenda. That meant that couldn't be achieved. And for the other reasons I've referred to this evening, with the other engagement that we're going to look to be doing, and also taking on this committee's recommendation regarding bringing it here before full council, that is going to change that timeline. But Audit Wales, I raised that with Audit Wales previously, and my understanding is they're comfortable with that timeline changing. They recognise that the dates in the report were kind of an initial really best estimation of what that timeline would look like, but inevitably, these committees throw up other things, and that's the purpose of it, isn't it? To say, well, actually, we feel that there should be further engagement here, or we feel that this needs to be returned to this committee before a certain step. I think from Audit Wales' perspective, as long as they're comfortable that the council is taking on board the recommendations and is working to deal with them, if dealing with them in the most robust way means the timeline is longer, that's not a problem in principle. But just to explain why, we had to send the organisational response form back straight away, essentially, before entering into this process. So that's why those dates were as they are.
Okay, thank you, Ian, for that. So I think I'm not seeing any other hands at the moment. So I think what we're saying is that we are happy to endorse the organisational response to this, but the completion dates do seem to be around reporting these elements to various groups rather than actually completing the full actions and getting those completed. And we would like the protocol and the various other elements as part of the recommendations to be brought back to this committee before going on to full council, given the implications this have in terms of the control framework for the area and for assurance purposes. So can I ask if everyone's happy to endorse that, please? Councillor Norman. Oh, Gareth?
Yeah, it's just say Councillor Goodjohn and Councillor Hooper both indicated happy to support and second that, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Gareth. Okay, we'll take that as approved then. Thank you. So that's great. Thank you, Ian, for your time this evening and for presenting that. It's been really useful to hear your points. On to the corporate risk register Q3 update, then that's item 5. Is Tom presenting this one?
Yeah, good evening,
Hello,
Chair. Hi, thanks very much for taking the report this evening. So this is the Q3 risk update. Currently 17 risks on the register, 5 scoring high, 5 medium high, 6 medium, and 1 medium low on the register at Q3. During the quarter, all of the risks have maintained their static position within the register, with the exception of 2. One of them is the additional learning needs risk that's escalated from medium high up to a high risk status, and COVID-19, which has de-escalated down from a score of 6 to a score of 4. The report this evening for members sets out some of the background to the escalation of the ALN risk. That's reflective of the risk environment having changed associated with implementing the new duties that the Act requires. That places significant additional requirements on both the local authority and on schools. And that means there's been a significant increase in demand. That then has a knock-on in terms of capacity issues on both central services, education services and specialist provision. At the request of the committee at Q2, we've had a look in more detail at the risks relating to COVID and Brexit. So we've done some further review during the quarter. In terms of COVID-19, that's forecast to diminish. There are still some areas of the council's activity that are impacted by coronavirus, for example, some operations in social services. However, because we've got new arrangements in terms of the communicable disease plan, the health protection plan that is being adopted this month about how COVID will be managed alongside other communicable diseases on that multi-agency basis, it does feel now as if it's the time to reduce that risk score from 6 to 4. And committee were also keen for us to have a look at the impact of Brexit, and we discussed at the last committee about, in effect, how Brexit is part of that economic landscape alongside the aftermath of the pandemic and other economic events, and the report sets out a little bit of detail on that one. Because both COVID and Brexit have reduced and are forecast to continue to do so, the report that you've got in front of you this evening, members, proposes that you recommend to Cabinet that those 2 risks are removed from the register. Cabinet have previously requested that a watching brief or some continued monitoring would happen in terms of those 2 risks, and the proposal from officers is that that could be done through the remaining risks on the register. So for example, the financial fragility risk. There are 3 register risks that we're forecasting to escalate over the year, and the report sets out some information in terms of financial fragility, the risk on the workforce, and also Project Zero. We're joined this evening by Ian Macmillan, the Head of Resource Management and Safeguarding, and I'll bring him in a moment, Chair, if I may, because committee are also requested to consider the inclusion of a new risk associated with the system, which is called WICIS, and Ian will talk about that risk so that you've got more information in a moment. But what I wanted to provide an update on, paragraphs 212 and 213 of the covering report set out some further information in terms of some work that we've been doing during the quarter. Alongside looking at those risks of COVID and Brexit, we've started to have a look at the overall risk landscape, and what we're proposing is that we'll bring some further updates for committee to consider at the end of year risk report, and that will look at some updates to the risk management strategy, updates to the way that we report on those risks, but also the content of the register as a whole. It feels time now that we're removing a couple of risks, putting one on potentially, and we'll have set the new budget, that it makes sense now to look at the register in the round. So I just wanted to give members some assurance that that work is happening. But with committee's permission, I'll ask Ian if he's happy to provide an overview now of the new proposed risk.
Yeah, that's great. Welcome, Ian.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for that, Tom. So I'm just going to talk to you briefly in relation to an escalating risk that we've identified that we wish to bring to your attention. So this is in relation to the Welsh Community Care Information Service, commonly known as WICIS, and its transition to the Community Care Programme. So WICIS has been in place across Wales since 2015. It's a single health and social care system. It's known as Care Director, but more commonly as WICIS. And that's currently in place in 14 local authorities and 5 health boards across Wales. So we've got 730 registered users within the Vale of Glamorgan Council. CCP is at a critical point in terms of technological and contractual drivers, which is going to force a decision in regard to its future. The deployment order in the Vale of Glamorgan will end on the 14th of March 2025, and the current underlying product, the end of its life, will come in January 2026. So this is an issue that's affecting all users across Wales that are in a similar position in relation to deployment orders. Following that, our digital department wouldn't be able to provide support in terms of the software, because it would be an unsupported software system, which would come with significant risks. So with that in mind, Care Director beyond 2026 will not be possible for us to use. The potential plan is for CCTP to replace the incumbent Care Director with 4 new systems. The one that we're focusing on now is the social care system for adult and children's services. We're in a relatively unique position within the Cardiff and Vale region in the fact that our University Health Board haven't adopted WICIS, and they've currently used Paris, and they're looking to replace that system by 2030. So they're very much having a watching brief in terms of how this programme will go in regard to the new CCP system for health. Cardiff Council are currently implementing the OLM Eclipse service for adult and children's services. So whilst they're again having a watching brief in terms of this project, they will not be looking to implement a new system within the next couple of years. We need to move on to a new system by 2026. Procuring, developing and migrating to a new system is complex, and I'm sure you would appreciate having 22 months in which to achieve this work is very challenging. Procurement is not currently on track to be completed before September 2024, which is going to leave only 14 months for delivery. The programme has been driven centrally by DHCW, and there's been significant delays in terms of decision making from Welsh Government, and that's caused subsequent delays in the programme commencing. So there's 4 key areas of programme risks, I would say, in relation to planning, procurement, funding, and the programme itself. We're at the point in time where there's been 3 vendors who have come forward who would like to be the contenders for a future system. and there's currently engagement with those vendors. The position for us in the Vale is that we were potentially having to look at going through a procurement and implementation exercise on our own. We've been holding conversations on an area level and on a national level in relation to being able to join up with other local authorities in terms of implementation. I'm pleased to inform you that on the 26th of February 24, myself and Nikki Johns, who's our head of digital, presented at the Cumtap Magana Regional Digital Board, and they've agreed that the Vale of Glamorgan could become part of their regional implementation and procurement team. So that's been a significant position and a reduction in terms of future risk and cost potentially. However, there remains real uncertainties in terms of future funding. The cost of the Vale of us moving to a new system are currently unclear. CCP hope to offer some funding and technical resource, and they're currently preparing a business case for the Health and Social Services Minister. It's due to be submitted at some point this month, but sufficient funding from Welsh Government is not guaranteed. On top of that, the new licences costs for a system are likely to be significantly higher than the ones we're currently paying for in relation to WCIS. So just to summarise the risks in relation to WCIS, because there's several high level of risks associated with the procurement of a suitable replacement. There's the failure to procure a replacement system before the current system becomes unsupported. And the risks around that would be very, very significant for us. Of course, primarily the risk would be to the service users, and because of the inability of staff to access relevant personal information, that would be very, very significant for us. And there'd also be risks in terms of regulatory compliance. There'd be no way of us monitoring our statutory duties, data migration or operational risk. We'd be unable to immediately monitor performance. There are financial implications with the uncertainty in terms of government position. It's not anticipated we'll get clarity on that until it's clear in respect of the procurement exercise. So there's an expectation that costs will need to be met by local authorities in the first instance, and that's in the financial climate that we're all very well cited on. There's real uncertainty in terms of the staffing resources. A lot of staff with these expertise they're a limited resource. They're not necessarily based in local authorities. And there's a risk in terms of us not having staff with the required skills to support the migration and implementation and ongoing support of a new system. So, you know, there's a risk in terms of internal capability and capacity. The last significant risk that we identified when we originally carried out this exercise was in relation to us being this unique regional position, but thankfully that seems to be resolved by Cumtap Magana agreeing for us to be part of their project team. So those are the risks that we've identified at the moment. So the process itself has experienced delays and very noticeable challenges at national level. It's currently recognised as a high priority at Welsh Government level. However, the timescale is extremely tight with very little room to accommodate any further delay. So happy to take any questions in relation to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Tom, for the presentation regarding the overall risk register. If I perhaps split this into two sections, given the very detailed update there from Ian on the WCIS new risk. Do members have any questions relating specifically to that risk, first of all, before we come on to the full risk register update?
Councillor Hooper has indicated he'd like to speak, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ian, for the update as well, and it's the comprehensiveness of it. Just a couple of questions. Firstly, I'm interested in when a risk appears, a new risk appears at 8 on our risk register, it does cause a question in my mind as to how it suddenly appeared in the framework at such a high level, and I'd just be interested in the history of this risk evolving and whether or not we should have been in a position to pick this up earlier. You've mentioned the project delivery risk, and I'm just interested in the mitigation that the council is starting to put in place, because we've recently, as I understand it, decided to employ a project delivery expert within the council. I wonder whether this is a good example of a project that they should be picking up with this, given the size of the risk. Thanks.
No, thank you, Councillor Hooper. In respect to the first question, the challenges in relation to transferring from WICIS have been known from some time. However, the risks significantly escalated over a relatively short period of time, and that's become because of the delays really in the last 3 to 4 months in terms of the national team. There have been a number of challenges in terms of the initial plan that was proposed from DHCW, which was going to be the transfer of all the 19 local authorities to one system. That was the plan that was put forward and proposed. I attended some meetings in Q2 this year when the national team engaged with local authorities across Wales and health boards and put that plan into place. There was such significant concerns and objections from, I think, there was a consensus in relation to that, but that then meant that a new plan had to go back to Welsh Government. I think it's fair to say that plan has taken some time, and there have been significant changes within the national team and a change within the strategy. That change within the strategy has meant that the risk has escalated quite quickly. However, I recognise that potentially we could have had this at a lower level on the risk register at an earlier point. In terms of support from a project team, what we do have is a regional digital lead here. So that's Tim Evans within the Vale of Glamorgan, and they're very much an external project lead in relation to WICIS. And Tim has got a high level of expertise in terms of dealing with procurement projects and implementation of major IT systems, and is I think the appropriate project lead in this case.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Hooper, did you want to come back in on that at all?
He declines. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. No, that's great. Thank you. Any other questions regarding or comments regarding that new risk at all? No, I'm not seeing any hands, in which case, if I go back to the overall risk register then, were there any questions regarding the broader risks in particular, perhaps around, for example, the Brexit and COVID elements that we discussed at the last meeting? Councillor Prothero?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to see COVID and Brexit being removed from there. My question is actually really to do with a potential additional risk that I haven't seen on here and hasn't really been mentioned very much, but it is a risk nevertheless. And that's the fact that within the next 6 to 7 months, October 2024, there is a complete change to the regime of public sector procurement. The Social Partnership and Procurement Act 2023 comes into being in October 2024. Now, this is a complete regime change, procedure changes. It'll mean policy changes, contract procedure rule changes. Training will needed to be rolled out for buyers or anybody who has anything to do with procurement. And I don't see anybody or anything being discussed in any of the meetings that I'm attending. And I'm wondering who would identify this as a risk and who would lead on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prothero. Tom, did you want to come back in on that at all?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Prothero. I think that's one of the ones that we would look to see reflected within the legislative change risk. And I know that Welsh Government have recently been publishing the explanatory documents associated with the social partnership legislation, and it's something that we're going to be discussing in the next couple of weeks at the strategic leadership team. So I wonder if committee were content for us to do so, we can pick up any potential risks and make sure that they are reflected within that section of the register as a first start.
guess, Tom, I think an update on, at least an update on the consideration of that risk would be useful, even if it's not a distinct risk on the risk register. I think that would be a good response. Councillor Prothero, are you happy with that response?
Absolutely. I just want people to be aware that this is a really big piece of work, though. It does affect everyone. It'll affect your schools, the procedures that they're following now, if they have 3 quotes for things, whether they raise sell to Wells notices or not. But the volume of what they do and how they do things is going to be very different. So it does need quite a focus.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions regarding the risk register?
We've got Councillor Hooper, then Councillor Goodjohn, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper?
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, just want to echo Councillor Prothero's welcoming of the removal of the COVID and Brexit risk. But I just wonder, does that need a formal recommendation from this committee? And if so, I'd like to move that recommendation that those are put to Cabinet. The second thing is relation to how we communicate risks. We spend a lot of energy in this council talking about how good we are at doing things. And sometimes risks are seen as a negative thing, where actually it's part of the education that residents need to understand the broader context of financial implications and things like that. So I just wonder whether we should give some due consideration to improving the risk conversation with residents from this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. In terms of the first question around whether you need a formal recommendation, yes, that would be really useful. And recommendation 1 includes some wording that if committee are happy with it, would make that recommendation on to Cabinet. Thank you for the comment around how we talk about risk. I think we've tried as part, certainly of over the last few weeks, as part of the conversation around the budget proposals, to talk about some of those pressures. But I think the idea of using the risk register as a potential means of adding to that conversation is a really helpful one. So thank you. And perhaps, if you're comfortable, once we bring the end of year position back and those proposals on actually, in effect, what is the totality of the risks that we're facing, that maybe is the start of that next phase of the conversation. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Tom. And I think that feeds into part 212 and 213 of your report as well, the looking at the overall risk processes and kind of making it more accessible, things like the language used and all of that, just to make it more accessible as well, so that people can access it and actually be part of that conversation better as well. Be really good. So yeah, we'll include that in the recommendation regarding the procurement legislation changes as well. Thank you. Councillor Goodjohn wants to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to start off then, I guess, I totally agree with the removal of the Brexit and COVID risks. We've been talking about this for a long time. I think it makes sense and we can all agree to that. And also with the inclusion of the WICs, I think if we want to endorse those 3 moves, I think that would make sense as a committee, but you're welcome to tell me otherwise. I wanted to ask around additional learning needs, because I asked this at the last meeting when we discussed the Q2 risk register, and I was promised an update via email, which I didn't end up getting in the end, I've realised. But we've put in an additional £850,000 into the additional learning needs and the changes from the latest legislation with the ALN Act. And since then, the risk has increased in likelihood. And now, from the budget that was passed at the 6th of March, there's been no additional money for ALN now that the risk has increased. The cost pressures were not awarded. Now, I wonder if that really makes sense between the decision making and the risk register. So any kind of update as to what's come from the £850,000 if the risk of us not meeting our statutory duties has only increased, and any kind of information as what's being done to mitigate this, other than the broad strokes that we've gotten in the report, which really hasn't detailed very much for now. But yes, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And my apologies that an email wasn't forthcoming. I will follow that up with my colleagues in learning skills and get an update, and perhaps, as we've done in the past, and put a particular focus on a particular risk within individual committees, it might be timely for us to do that around ALN the next time that we bring that report. I can make sure as well in the response that you get, and all members will be copied, that we break down the additional funding that has gone into additional learning needs. So you'll have seen in the budget report, for example, that there are proposals, or there are plans now to increase the amount of funding for certain resource-based provision, which is associated with ALN, for example. So there is significant investment going in. The risk, as the report summarises, is that that investment, it cannot rise as quickly as the complexity and the level of demand is. But it certainly is something that I know my colleagues in learning and skills have got a very tight grip on, or as tight a grip as they can do. But I'll make sure that some further information is circulated, and that we have somebody here at the next committee meeting that we see the register.
Councillor Goodjohn, are you happy with that response?
Yes,
Do you have any other further
fantastic.
comments?
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any other hands at the moment. Okay, so we are being asked to note the Q3 position of the corporate risks as outlined in the report, including the inclusion of the new risk relation to the WICIS, and refer any other comments to Cabinet for their consideration, one of which is the procurement regulations risk that we would like to be referred and to have considered for inclusion on the risk register, or at least an update on that review, and whether if it's not added to the risk register, why that is. So can I have endorsements for those recommendations, please? So those are 4.
Councillor Hooper in the chair, and Councillor Goodjohn.
Councillor Wood on the screen.
Yeah, Councillor Wood, yeah, that's fine. Got plenty, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone against? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone against, so that's approved. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda then is the regional, yes, Gareth?
Could we just take this at the end? Because it goes into part 2, so it makes sense. We took this at the very end, and we just go, if you go into the recommendation monitoring first, and then the updated forward programme. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Gareth. Good suggestion. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 7 then, which is the recommendation monitoring report. Is Gareth here or Joan? Joan's going to present this one. Okay, welcome, Joan. Hello.
Hello, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide members of the committee with a position statement on the internal audit recommendations made, implemented and outstanding as at the 29th of February 2024. Appendix A provides the detail. A total of 116 high and medium priority recommendations have been made following conclusion of audits from this year's 23-24 plan. All have been agreed, and to date 53 have been implemented and 62 have a future implementation date. There is currently one recommendation that has exceeded its target date. This is in respect of the Leisure Centre contract performance and monitoring audit, and discussions are ongoing with the relevant officers to ensure implementation is achieved. Appendix A also provides information on audits undertaken pre-23-24, where recommendations are overdue or the target date for implementation is yet to arrive. More detail is provided on these in Appendix B and Appendix C. Appendix B provides detail of the 1 high risk and 1 medium risk recommendations outstanding. That is, the agreed target date has been exceeded. These are in respect of 2 audits. The high risk outstanding recommendation relates to the Escoladeri St Cyrie's building compliance audit, which was undertaken during 22-23. This recommendation was one of the outstanding recommendations discussed during the previous Governance and Audit Committee, and the Director of Environment and Housing has been invited to attend this meeting to provide an update this evening. The other recommendation discussed in the previous Governance and Audit Committee was in respect of Romley Primary School, and a follow-up audit is in the process of concluding, and this will helpfully verify if the recommendation has been successfully implemented. Appendix C provides details of the medium priority recommendation made in the corporate safeguarding audit undertaken in 21-22, which still has a future implementation date. This has been discussed previously at committee and full implementation is due by July 2024. In addition, 14 recommendations made during 22-23 plan still have a future target date. Any undue delays or issues identified whilst monitoring the implementation of recommendations and are highlighted in regular meetings with the strategic leadership team and ultimately in this committee. If it's okay with you now, Chair, I'll hand over to Miles Punter, the Director of Environment and Housing, to provide committee with more details in respect of the overdue recommendation raised previously. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks.
Welcome, Miles.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Joan. Chair, first thing is an apology to this committee for the tardiness in respect of the Escalade recommendation. What I've done is, you imagine, I have many audits in my large service area, and what I've now done is I've made sure that there's a standing item on my directorate management team to ensure that this doesn't happen again without very good reason. So I am pleased to advise that the report to the strategic leadership team concerning the escalation of issues with compliance as regards this audit is going to SLT tomorrow, strategic leadership team tomorrow. It's already been sent out to heads of service for their comment, and I hope to have this in place as an escalation process by the end of this month. If I can give committee a little bit of detail about this one, there's a slight anomaly in terms of schools and compliance. The council is the employer for the majority of schools under the Health and Safety at Work Act, but it doesn't hold the budget for repairs and maintenance. So sometimes we have an SLA with the schools, a service level agreement, which requires us to do the inspections required for compliance. And by compliance, we're talking about gas, electricity, lifts, Legionella, that sort of thing. In which case we undertake the inspections and then we send the inspection reports to the school, offering to do the work for them, or they can choose to do the work themselves. Sometimes the school choose to do the compliance work themselves as well, so the inspections and everything. So there's not a set pattern. So it is difficult for us to get an absolutely robust arrangement in place here. But what I've done in terms of this proposed escalation arrangement is that if we find that a school is out of compliance, that's either its certificate has not been provided to us because it's actually ensuring its own compliance inspections, or if we undertake a compliance inspection and there's outstanding work, we will always write to the director in the case of buildings other than schools. In the case of schools, we will write to the head teacher and the chair of governors, advising of the issue either with the certificate being out of date or with the work being required as a result of the inspection being undertaken. We will ask for a response to that within a set number of days, which will give us an assurance that the school has recognised the issue and that it has made plans to undertake the work necessary. In addition to that, we will do quarterly reports to the council's strategic leadership team, picking up all those issues where letters have been sent and whether responses have been received or not. If the situation gets to the SLT level, then a further letter will be sent to the school or director of the employing department advising that there's still outstanding actions in terms of the compliance inspection. So we'll, as I say, it's going to go to SLT tomorrow. Hopefully my colleagues will agree that and we can move forward with that. And it'll also be subject to further inspection by my audit colleagues. But that's probably the best we can do in terms of schools because, as I say, we don't hold the budget for repairs. Schools hold their own budget for repairs. We can't force them to do the repair work. What we can do is escalate the fact that repairs are required to the head teacher, who is a building manager, and to the chair of governors, recognising the importance of these issues. And as I say, the further backstop then is if no response is received, it will be reported to the strategic leadership team every quarter, and a further letter will be sent from essentially the chief executive in respect of compliance. So hopefully this will provide an escalation process which ensures that the problems that we had with the Aderi and St Cyrus inspection will not happen again. I can't guarantee that, But if it does happen again, at least all the senior players in terms of that arrangement will be in the knowledge that there was a compliance issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that update, Miles, and Joan for the overall report. Does anyone have any questions in relation to, in particular, those recommendations or any of the other reports on the under this item? Okay, or any comments at all? Okay, thank you. So I think that's a really good update on that one. So thank you for giving us that update on the recommendations and in particular in relation to those committees. So thank you for your time, Miles. That was a really good update and a really useful bit of context around that and the difficulties in working with the school. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
There's a couple of elements under this item which I confess I've just messed my papers up, so that we are being asked to consider the information provided in the status of the high and medium recommendations made. So is everyone happy to endorse that item on the agenda?
Yes, Chair, we've got Councillor Goodjohn and Councillor Hooper. Seconded. And,
thank you. Councillor Goodjohn and Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? I'm not seeing any votes, so that one is carried. Thank you very much. So under item 8 is the updated forward programme for 23-24. Who's taking this one, please? Joan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As committee are aware, this is the updated forward work programme. Appendix A has been updated to reflect decisions from previous meetings. I'd just like to point out the Governance and Audit Committee self-assessment item has been moved to the April meeting. This will provide time to analyse the completed questionnaires that have been received by members of this committee. In addition, an internal audit progress report item will be presented to the next committee because it was felt it was more timely because it will provide members with a provisional final position in respect to the 23-24 plan. Similarly, at the next meeting, we've got the future dates of committees, so we will put a forward work programme together for the next municipal year. The next meeting is on the 22nd of April, so the proposed agenda items are in the table.
Thank you, Joan. So yes, we've got 2 recommendations.
Hello, Chair, you just broke up there for a moment.
I have any questions for?
Sorry, Chair. You did...
There we go. Am I back now?
You're back now. Yeah, well, we did lose you for a brief moment.
Apologies.
Yeah, just say that Councillor Hooper has said you'd like to speak. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm searching desperately for the point where the Cardiff City region come and talk to us about their accounts, and I still can't see it anywhere. And I'd like to have a date, please, because surely they finished them by now.
Has anyone got an update for Councillor Hooper on that point?
Yes, the Head of Finance is issued to answer that, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
I'm in discussion with colleagues at the Cardiff Capital Region. The audit of their accounts isn't complete yet, and we will look to put it on the agenda of this committee once that is the case, but I don't have a date at the moment.
Okay, so if we can just make sure that's captured, please, as a further action, just to make sure that that does come back and isn't lost off a future agenda, that would be great. Any other questions or comments relating to this item? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so we're being asked to consider and note the forward work programme and endorse the schedule of items for the next committee meeting, which is under 2.4 in the papers. Can I have a proposer and seconder for that, please?
Yeah, Councillor Hooper has proposed it. And can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Goodjohn? Yep, Councillor Goodjohn. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone against? I'm not seeing any hands, so that's carried. Thank you. So we now go back to item 6, but that actually links directly through to the part 2 item on the agenda. So forgive me, I've not experienced this before, Gareth, so I'd welcome your advice on how to take this one.
There is some information we can relay in part 1, if I'm correct, Chair. So I've just had that nod. So if we can hand over to Head of Finance, I think they'll give an update, and then once it's appropriate, Chair, we'll ask the committee to move to part 2. Thanks.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Gareth. Okay, Matt, are you going to come in on this one then?
Yeah. Evening, everyone. I will, it does make sense to introduce the part 1 report first, and I'll do that, but I think we'll probably spend a brief amount of time on that and then spend the majority of the time on the part 2. You'll recall, and actually it wasn't that long ago, the 5th of February meeting, was it, that a high-level report had been requested on the continuation of the partnership. But certainly in considering the report at that meeting, it was clear the members identified they would like to see some further detail before we took a report onto Cabinet, confirming the continuation of the partnership. So the part 1 report in front of you this evening is actually broadly the same, broadly similar to the report they had on the 5th of February. The part 2 report, though, does contain what we believe is the additional content that you sought to see. So there is greater detailed content on the background to the operation of the partnership at the moment, including the benefits that have accrued to date, details of the further development that we've been exploring, detail on the resources deployed in delivering the service to the 4 partners at the moment. Not surprisingly, there's some impact of the departure of one of the existing 4 members at the moment is set out, and then some further content on benefits of continued membership for the 3 partners. The report will go to, the intentions for the report to go forward to Cabinet on the 21st of March, and that will seek to continue the Vale as host of the partnership, to go forward certainly in the interim with the Vale of Glamorgan, Bridgend and Merthyr as members of the partnership. We are, and a good comment was made at the last committee, we are looking to revise the arrangements to have the partnership on a continuous basis, but with regular review. And we've had positive discussion on with our existing partners on that revision. And the report in 21st of March will also seek to facilitate further members joining on an equal footing. So that's just a brief few words on introducing the part 1 report. Thank you. I'm not sure if there's any questions at this stage.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I'm just a little confused regarding the recommendations of this one, because this recommendation is that we're there to endorse it, but obviously the part 2 has a slightly different recommendation. So I just want to check what we're being asked to do in the part 1 agenda item, please.
It's basically to go into part 2, Chair. So, yeah. I guess if Councillor Goodjohn has got a question, as long as it's not strange to part 2, can we just take Councillor Goodjohn's question?
Yeah, welcome, Councillor Goodjohn. Please bring your question.
Yeah, just in an attempt to have some kind of discussion within part 1. If we need to move to part 2, please tell me. Do we have any reason that we're being asked to continue for 5 years still, rather than a shorter period of time? I know you've been considering having it on a continuous basis, but we're still being asked to recommend for 5 years. And can you provide any detail at all as to which other authorities in South Wales you've had discussion with? If not, please tell me so.
We need to clarify the recommendation going forward. When it goes to Cabinet, my intention is that we'll be recommending a continuous basis of membership, but with a regular review. Certainly the existing arrangement has been working well, but it does create some uncertainty on a regular basis. But it is important that we review and that the partners remain content that it's working for them. Can't really talk about prospective members in part 1, and we'll pick that up in part 2.
Okay, are there any other questions at this stage that members would like to ask? I'm not seeing any hands go up. Yeah, they're in the chamber. No,
just nothing in the chair. Sorry, just to clarify, if we can note the part 1 report, Chair, and then we need to agree to go into part 2. So should we do the part 1 first, Chair? Thanks.
Okay, no problem. So are we all happy to note part 1?
Yep, we've got Councillor Hooper and Councillor Goodjohn, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone against noting the part 1? I'm not seeing any hands, so we'll take that as noted. And then I think that draws us to the end of the part 1 agenda.
Yeah, just to clarify, Chair, what we need to do is have a proposer and seconder to move into part 2, and then the committee just needs to agree they're happy to go into part 2, Chair, and we'll stop the live stream at that point. Okay.
Okay, so can I have a proposer and a seconder for moving to part 2? I've got Councillor Hooper.
Proposer move to part 2.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper, and I've also got Councillor Prothero as the next seconder online. Gareth.
Okay, Chair, just give us 10 seconds to stop the stream, and I'll confirm when we're okay to speak in part 2. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.